Welcome to TIDES, where we dive deep into transformational innovations driving enterprise strategies. Today, we are excited to explore the evolving role of OKRs in the age of AI and how they are reshaping business transformation. Joining us are two incredible thought leaders in this space. First, we have Reid Koster. Reid is a seasoned professional in OKRs and strategic alignment with a wealth of experience helping organizations implement OKR frameworks that drive both team and business outcomes. Reid, we are thrilled to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Shweta.
And also with us is Olivia Arisis. Eris. And also with us is Olivia Eris. Olivia is a dynamic people and culture leader known for her transformative approach to talent management, culture, and organizational design. With a background spanning a variety of industries, she has led human-centric strategies that foster both individual and organizational growth. Olivia, it's great to have you on this panel today.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invite, Shweta.
To start with, I would love to explore from both your perspectives how the OKR framework can be a powerful tool for aligning teams and business objectives. Reid, you want to jump in?
Of course. So I'll start with, as I often do with an OKR training for an org that is new to the OKR concept, the sort of the backstory of OKRs. Very briefly, why they came about. I think it helps us understand what it's adding, what it's adding to a business and why it came about as a goal setting methodology. So a lot of people are familiar with John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters, which does a great job telling the story of how OKRs can powerfully change organizations and their culture. He does a great job talking about the birth of OKRs being an invention of Andy Grove at Intel. And the story of Andy Grove leading Intel was that he decided the way that they set goals, the traditional method of goal setting, had some huge problems with it that he didn't feel like would allow him to be successful running the company. So he said, let's change a couple of things. First of all, when we set goals, let's take what is traditionally an annual process or even longer and shrink down that cadence where we set goals more frequently, maybe even quarterly or monthly in some cases, because we need to be able to communicate frequently to move quickly and in an agile manner to business threats and challenges. And the second thing he was really trying to solve for, it was goal setting was seen as a traditionally top-down process. Leadership was trusted to solve these big problems, but leaders didn't have the best insight into every problem in the business. He trusted sometimes recent hires more than the leaders in groups to solve problems that had to do with the most modern engineering tasks. So he said, let's have a goal setting system that's more frequent in nature in goal setting and review. That increases the amount of communication as an organization. And then let's trust everybody to be a part of this. We want the inventiveness and creativity of everyone in the org to be contributing to problem solving. So it's bottoms up as well as top down alignment. So alignment is still the core problem people are trying to solve, I would say, even today as we're implementing OKRs for the first time. How do we as a business make sure everyone is working on the right thing that's actually pushing results that matter to every part of the business? So there's a lot that's changed with the methods of writing and publishing and reviewing OKRs over the years. And right now, it's an interesting and exciting time to think about how AI assists the process and how it could, I guess, be misused to get in the way of the process.
Awesome. Olivia, what's going on in your mind? How do you want to address this question of how OKRs help with alignment in the business and focus?
Yeah, I think from my lens, from seeing these kinds of models being integrated into organizations, one of the interesting shifts that I think that we're seeing in organizations is just the frequency and in how often strategic plans are laid and business cycles are run. I think historically a lot of organizations could look out 10, 15 years, and in the 70s and 80s, and the speed at which information flowed, that made sense at that point in time. And, as business practices have evolved, and the speed of how we need to deliver has evolved, we haven't kept up in every area of the supporting practices that need to help with that kind of evolution, including goal setting and recalibration of goals throughout any business cycle. And so I think to be able to stay agile, this kind of methodology really adds value for, the need to revisit and consistently adapt our strategy to ladder up to, moving needs of the economies that we operate in and the countries that we're in or the markets that we're in. But it's also, I think, an important thread to when we're talking about larger organizations, where we don't have all of the benefits of, tapping the guy next to us on the shoulder and letting them know what change is coming, to really build that common language and a common understanding of how to talk about goal setting, so that from a performance management lens, or even just from a cultural perspective of talking about how an organization wants to move in the right direction, creating that foundational knowledge or that foundational language starts to become an accelerator to actually getting the work done. It's less time focusing on, needing to explain the methodology in itself, but having a framework in itself really, I think, supports in the acceleration of hitting those targets. So it's I think, an interesting time for this kind of work, because we're seeing such a higher frequency in business cycles. And it's one where those companies that have been successful in adopting this kind of strategy, they're reaping the benefits. But from a change management perspective, I think it is still a huge learning curve for a lot of organizations to shift from some of those, the fundamentals of goal setting, which allow for a little more time. They might be a little more linear in nature, to a more agile model that requires us to think differently about how and when and in what order and with whom we achieve our goals. So it's a pretty neat time for business that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be so interesting to weigh in on how two different types of organizations are experiencing this AI transformation. Organization A has OKR methodology integrated into their ecosystem and now are embarking on AI digital transformation. What does their experience look like versus organization B, which is probably still following traditional SMART goal cascading down goal setting approach? And what's the impact of that approach on their business model readiness?
Yeah, I think it's a good question to pose, because the challenge of implementing OKRs is a large one. And to Olivia's point, it's a common language in the organization. Imagine teaching many new groups to speak a new language. It can feel really clumsy at first and awkward. So organization A, in your example, they've gone through that growing pain phase, and ideally everyone is speaking the same language and realizing the benefits that have come from it. So now we can apply AI and new tooling to look at the processes that are inefficient around it, but not to necessarily replace the core benefit of just better communication habits. That second organization, I think they're gonna struggle in the same way that I think every organization, when they first are trying to adopt OKRs or any sort of transparent, aligned goal setting methodology, is going to experience, which is, we're actually asking you to do more. We're asking you to talk about goals more, right? If you're doing it once a year, you're doing it 4 times a year, let's say, in a quarterly model. We're actually asking more of you, but that's absolutely necessary if we need to be able to trust the whole organization actually is aligned and focused on the right things. So that lift still exists. I think we can benefit from making the communication and the education around that a little more streamlined. But it's such a big lift, and then there's always going to be people who bristle at that.
Yeah, and Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Reid, I think one thing that comes to mind for me that I'd be curious to get your perspective on, actually for both of you, I think there's the argument that could be made to say, early adopters are going to they're going to kind of reap some of the benefit, obviously, earlier than those organizations that might lag in transformation or change. But then they also have to invest a lot more, which means that, from a macro lens, the companies that are first to market on something or that are really advancing the way, the change management that comes with that, the learning and failing forward that comes along with that, it's a part of the process and evolution. And I think, lucky for us, there's always those organizations that are going to step up and say, yes, I'm on board. I want to, lead the way on this. But then sometimes I wonder from organization B's perspective, there is the organization who lags and does not come along. That's one thing that, there's a likelihood you will be left behind, eventually. But then there's this middle group, of organization B where they're just kind of falling behind that leading team. And I wonder if there's almost like a generation skip that could come from, learning from all the failures of those leading the charge, but without having to make those mistakes and reinvesting your dollars in different ways, or having if you waited a little longer, would you have a larger access to talent, let's say, who has already learned the OKR methodology, is comfortable with that kind of goal setting that could integrate it into the organization a lot faster. So I'm curious your thoughts, based on what you've seen, is there a case to be made, I guess, for an organization that's not jumping on right away?
You mean just to implementing OKRs in general?
Yeah. And adapting to the tech.
Let me just start with saying that the core impulse I often find that I'm working with in an organization that's really resistant to OKRs. And guess what? OKRs aren't for everybody. Actually, we have to be really sensitive as we're going through program design. Maybe it's not the right methodology for an organization. I think transparency and alignment are valuable for every organization, but sometimes there's just something about the specific rules of OKRs that won't work. But something I'm always running into is this impulse of perfect being the enemy of good. And I want to get this right the first time. I might have already used this analogy a bit, but it's you're building muscle. There's growing pains. One of the most apt analogies is always that sort of exercise analogy. So in your example, Olivia, of if you're in group B and you want to wait for organization A to really figure everything out and get it perfect before you start, there's this understanding that there's this perfect future version where basically all the knowledge can be applied to your organization with none of the pain. Whereas the pain itself, much like an exercise, there's discomfort in actually working new muscles and exercising. That pain is part of what brings the healthy results organizationally.
I like that. That's a good point.
Definitely calibrate it. Can we learn as much as we can with guidance to avoid pitfalls, to start with an OKR program that makes sense for our organization? Absolutely do that, but don't let perfect become the enemy of good. Don't wait until you're assured you'll be 100% successful with this process before you ask everybody to start exercising, to start building that muscle so that you are stronger after 1 quarter, 2 quarters a year at being great communicators and aligning around your strategy.
I love that. And it's, there is a quote that I've heard, which is continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection, which I think was Mark Twain, but don't quote me on that, Shweta. Don't Google that. And yeah, I think your comment to say the very act of getting in there and learning how to adapt to something new starts to build inherent transferable skills that may apply to other parts of an organization, not just within, an OKR methodology. But the cool thing is that something like OKRs, you can count on will touch every part of your organization. So, if there is an enterprise-wide initiative that an organization could leverage to build those skills of, helping people become more comfortable in the uncomfortable, helping people learn how to build their risk tolerance, helping support folks in being agile and adaptable or cross-functional in ways, that then can start to infuse into other parts of an organization. It doesn't just have to be on the goal setting front, but they're really those core fundamental skills that are needed to run a healthy business. So I really like that thinking.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious to know, because Reid, you mentioned that this framework might not be the best framework for all. Which companies are good candidates for this framework, and which companies should not even try?
Well, oftentimes it starts with a leadership culture that's amenable to it. John Doerr, he would often say, if you don't have your leaders behind this, don't even try. Now, that could just be referring to if you don't have leadership's blessing to roll this out, it's going to be really difficult. But I think centrally, it matters that you have leaders who are going to stand by and trust that this process of getting better at transparency, getting better at setting stretch goals, reaching for something really big and actually failing at times is not just tolerable, but beneficial for everybody, right? So leadership culture, I can tell pretty quickly if it's going to fit or it's not. Now, we sometimes in an OKR implementation, we can kind of play a little trick, which is, sometimes I'll be talking to an organization and they're leaders who are really allergic to the term OKR. They've had a bad experience with it, and it might not be the fault of OKRs themselves, but just poor management in the past or one particularly bad experience. I think it's absolutely fine to use different terminology, like infusing SMART goal language or other goal language, goals and milestones as opposed to objectives and key results, to package a goal setting framework that really accomplishes the same thing as OKRs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are a couple things I look out for.
That's very interesting. I'm just building onto this because I'm very curious to know, Olivia, from your perspective, where do you sense the most resistance when you've seen OKRs being deployed in an organization? Is it at leadership level? Is it at employee, or is it both?
I think it depends. I've seen it. I've seen high adoption from leaders, and I've seen really high adoption from individuals at all levels of an organization. I think there's definitely some criteria that goes along that I've kind of observed, at least around where you see some of that that high adoption versus folks that are a little more resistant. And again, I do think that some of it may be inherent to subcultures within an organization. There are, I would say similar to what Reid was describing. I mean, if you have pockets in an organization where, they are used to culturally running in a very particular way, maybe in more traditional top-down frameworks, or they are maybe more siloed in nature as a team. And sometimes that's by design in an organization, right? It's necessary for the purpose of, whatever a department or a team is trying to accomplish. Then, yeah, it definitely can be, I think, harder to integrate the OKR methodology within that sort of subunit. But at kind of level, if I'm thinking about levels, like leadership level, definitely you need the leadership buy-in to, if you want to integrate OKRs into an organization or anything into an organization, at least at, it doesn't have to be perfect buy-in or 100%, but, you do want enough advocates at the highest levels of leadership who are not only going to advocate for the methodology itself, but who are going to live it and practice it. Yeah. And you can count on them to keep the conversation alive behind closed doors. They're following up, they're doing the work. And I think with a lot of these kinds of methodologies, they sound great on paper. They read really nicely, and theoretically, you can see the value. But when you start to get into the organization, and it's not to say that there's a true resistor. To be frank, it's often those that do nothing, like in the sense of behaviorally, no change occurs, even if they're bought in. That can be the hardest place to shape the impact, because it's without practice, it's just a great idea. Yeah. So I think that is where really the coaching and conversation driving behavior starts to, where rubber starts to meet the road a little when it comes to these kind of methodologies.
And Olivia, I want to call out, because you're saying it's so important they keep the process alive, keep the message alive. And I want to be really sympathetic. I get your leaders are very busy with extremely important stuff. And so I don't ever want, when I'm working with an organization, to tell them that they have to dedicate 40% of their time to just thinking about setting and reviewing goals and in really impacting their bandwidth. It's all about doing something. I think you had said you have to do something to change behavior. Let's make it as simple as possible and really encourage leaders to just communicate in that language that we just shared with the whole organization and told everybody this is important. Let's just make sure they don't slip back into speaking something a little bit different, confusing the message again, and really taking the wind out of everyone's sails.
Yeah, and if you've gone and done it well, I think what I've seen with leaders, that really have adopted to it, it's building in the mechanism, because a true OKR methodology, I think, should directly connect to your everyday. If you have done it, methodically, and you've really thought about what those objectives and key goals are gonna bring to the organization, there should be connectivity between OKRs and the work that your people are performing almost every day. Otherwise, as leaders, we'd want to question what is the work we're doing and why doesn't it line up to the most important goals that we've set to establish for our organization. And it's true. It's like if I want to start eating healthy, but I haven't actually taken inventory of my fridge to say how much junk food's in here and how do I get it out and replace it with healthy stuff, I'm not gonna change my behavior. And it's that same look at how we structure team meetings, at how we have one-on-one conversations, how we build practices in that are going to keep that healthy eating habit, using the OKR methodology alive every day. So yeah, I think that really does become a key part of the experience for healthy teams.
Mm-hmm. We've been talking about adoption challenges related to OKRs, but while we were having this conversation, my mind went to a simple question, like let's assume organization A that we were talking about, which has already adopted OKRs and knows how to play the game when it comes to OKRs, is now going through digital transformation primarily because of AI, and AI pushed digital transformation is not like any that we've seen in the past. It's like everything everywhere all at once. In that kind of scenario, can OKRs also be something that organizations can lean on to facilitate change for not OKR adoption, but how the organization adopts multiple changes that are coming their way due to AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, OKRs are great for looking at something that is a large organizational shift that needs to take place in a shorter period of time. How are we going to measure outcomes that we believe this digital transformation is going to enact? So, how do we take a look at the 5 most important things, let's say at the organization level? And if one of those 5 is about business agility or modernizing your technology internally, absolutely, it has a place in your OKRs, and communicating it effectively from the top and working to align through every level of your organization. towards those outcomes around modernization or efficiency, whatever the reason is for implementing those changes, they're really effective at making sure, you're aligned around what matters. So again, it starts with clear definition of those OKRs and communicating them well to the org so that everyone can align to them.
Yeah, and I think the only thought I have to complement this is, I think from my experience, and I know I'm a bit biased in what I'm about to say because I focus on people in my role, but I think sometimes as organizations we look to digital transformation, we look to technology to solve otherwise inherently people-centric problems. And I think that would be the only word of advice is when we're looking at digital transformation, when we're looking at AI in anything we do, it's pausing to understand, why, really asking ourselves truly, like, why is this important to our organization? And when we think about goal setting around that, just ensuring that there is a complementary people lens, because digital transformation in itself or leveraging AI as a tool in itself, in absence of the knowledge and skills and capabilities and connection of people, the people that are running that technology, starts to, really become disjointed, and it can lead to failed goals. And it can feel like, wow, I set out to do this great, work in digital transformation, and I built this beautiful OKR methodology around it, but I forgot the other layers of complexity that come into that. And so I think just helping, part of my role is really helping leaders come back to creating some balance in a highly tech world where a lot of us are talking about digital transformation, keeping some of those core fundamentals of psychology and org effectiveness at the root of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I actually think a well-implemented OKR program is going to help you avoid that issue of just focusing on the wrong incentive. So ideally, the process of crafting your OKR is you ask that question, why, a few times. Well, why are we pursuing digital transformation? And you find the higher level why to really distill into your objective. And then you balance key results around that. You have 3 to 5, 2 to 4 key results per objective. And the idea is, you might be measuring how quickly everyone is trained on some new technology internally, but you want to counterbalance that with the other results you don't want to see forgotten about. Are people still benefiting from this? And what's the right measure for making sure there's a healthy metric showing our people, are improving as well. So you balance a few different key results, which are the measure of success for each objective, right? So, and those key results are oftentimes not just thought up by one person, in a silo. You're collectively having meetings and discussing, and you have people on the people team talking with operations and strategy and making sure that's a balanced objective, and you're working towards the right outcomes.
Yeah, I think AI is not going away, so it's going to be like the genie's out of the box now, and all organizations have to figure out how to integrate it into their ecosystem at organizational and also at individual level. But I'm curious to hear from both of your perspectives, like if we have to imagine a future with AI in the mix, how do you see the future of goal setting and performance management, let's say, a year from now?
Do you want to take that, Olivia, to start?
Ooh, sure. One thing that comes to mind for me when I think about AI augmenting our, human performance in an organization, there is so much value that's going to come from, I think, having this, this knowledge and access to everything and anything that we want. But at the same time, there is the likelihood, as we develop AI technology we've seen how quickly it's already developed. And even just in the next year, I think the challenge that we're going to face is, as we use AI more and more to support and build and design our strategies, how do we ensure that we are not eroding human capability and human skills in the process? I think there's a couple really useful practices or practical approaches for AI. AI can brings up the baseline, like everyone now has this level of access to intelligence that is there for them. But I think when that intelligence starts to replace our desire and drive for curiosity to actually continue to explore and learn on our own to create new, there's going to be, we might end up in a pretty dangerous place. So I do think that when it comes to goal setting, it's still going to be important for organizations to be thinking about what is the level of integration of AI that we want to create, we want to bring into our organization to generate ideas, and how do we complement that with creative human capability and skill as well to complement it. And until I don't even know what the right mix is going to be, but the reality is, if everyone put in, give me some great OKRs into AI is probably going to create something very similar for a lot of different organizations. So the question becomes, how do we differentiate ourselves outside of the AI realm, which is going to be giving a lot of different companies the same ideas and input so that we can, be marketable in a new way?
Yeah, you're talking about how do we not just take the slider and move it all towards AI to remove people? I think some of the early applications when people were getting excited about how AI is going to impact OKRs, it was exactly what you said. It was like, let's just ask it to write a really good OKR for a marketing team. Like what are great OKRs for a sales team? All in all, it's valuable to get ideas from that, right? As part of an OKR workshop, it's super important to have a phase of the workshop, the phase of the brainstorm, which is all about generating ideas. You turn off the part of your brain, which is judging, and it's all about creating, right? Absolutely. What if you could start with about 20, 30 ideas generated based on, vast sets of data you can feed to the AI about what are some things we could focus on. But what's happening in that room, ideally, is that the people there are exercising their creativity. They're curious about this data and transforming it into something powerful for the business. And that thing that's happening in the room is how you distill it to 3 to 5 things that people actually feel connected to and excited to work on in the business. So like what I see there is like where the slider sort of has to stop is that meeting in the room or on Zoom, that connection where people are now reviewing the generated input and now drawing a lot of connections or improving upon the connections being drawn between these ideas and distilling that into something to focus on. And so with OKRs, I think leaning on AI to help with distilling insights from a great set of data, which then, that can inform strategy and then generate a lot of ideas for you to pursue. You still need people to share amongst themselves what matters in that room and really prioritize, because prioritization is hard. So that communication, that connection live and in person, I would hate to see go away if people over-relied on AI. Same with the performance management world, right? If you feel like everything is being done and calculated without much of your presence or input in the process, it's going to be hard to see that as a process that's built to make you successful and value you as part of this organization. So how it can help the performance review process by highlighting insights, but you still have to have that connection between manager and direct report that is going to leave both of them feeling hopefully more energized to do great things for your business.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think it frankly, I think it saves energy in the process from having to, do things like data manipulation or pulling specific info out. I think the skills that we'll need as organizations to really draw on the benefit of that are going to shift as well. So when we think about leveraging AI for goal creation, it comes down to how we prompt, how we ask, smart questions of the system so that it can populate and give information in different kinds of ways that we can then draw on to build, more thought-provoking goals and opportunities for an organization. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also, I think, going to be how we look at the results of an AI population, because we know that anything AI puts out, it's drawn from a very large data set that we have to still look to validate in some way. And when it comes to the professionalism and credibility of the strategic directions that we're setting for our organization, it's, I think, drawing in the critical skill, the lens of being critical on what AI is putting out and ensuring that we've got it to, the appropriate place as far as the type of information it's drawing in, and ensuring the accuracy of that if we're going to really, bank on that to direct where we're taking our organization in the future. So I think that's where, again, we have to be sure as organizations, we are really building up the capabilities of our people alongside the use of AI technology.
Yeah, it's such interesting times that we are living in, and I'm nervous, but I'm very excited to see how the future of workforce, which might have humans, but also robots and also autonomous decision-making systems in place, will come together. And how do we balance it all out so that humans don't lose out in this equation? But I'm super stoked by the conversation that we had today. And as we wrap up, what would be that one piece of advice you would give to companies looking to balance AI innovation with clear strategic goal setting through OKRs?
I guess the parting thought would be, based on what we're just saying here, it's all about how you use the AI, and hopefully it's to amplify the strengths of your people. There's a lot of great ways to make everyone more present to exercise their creativity and instinct. And that's what you want by, applying AI to administrative work and tasks. But if you think the point is to eliminate every moment when people are coming together to exercise that creativity, then you're probably overreaching a little bit and getting excited about the technology and not the result. I think at core, what I always say with OKRs and aligned goal setting is the secret is it's not about the goal. It's about communication habits. Mm-hmm. Are you as an organization building strong communication habits? So allow AI and this transformation to pave the way for your organization to clear the lines of communication in the organization, but there still has to be a person on each end of the line. That's the whole point of putting the system in place.
We said, Reid, I don't know if I can beat that one, but I think what comes to mind for me is really that, this is not the first and will probably not be the last, disruption we've seen to the way we work fundamentally. I think that for organizations, the important question to ask ourselves is not, how will AI change our business? I think it's how do we want AI to change our business? And we have control over, that decision. And I think that every organization's answer to that question is going to be unique to their values, their offerings, their goals and objectives, and prioritizing the way in which we choose to leverage AI in our practices is going to help shape the future of our individual organizations and the offering that we bring to, our clients. So, I think it's really taking ownership in that exercise rather than letting the industry dictate how we want to shape our strategy around AI is going to be a really important exercise for all of us.
Well said. Thank you both for your time. It has been incredibly insightful hearing your perspectives on how OKRs and AI are shaping the future of business strategy and performance. And to our listeners, stay tuned for more episodes of TIDES. And if you liked the episode, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Reid.
Thank you.
Thanks.